Hi, everybody. This is Warren Herman, and so today what we're going to be talking about is this wonderful subject that I'm going to call monk addiction. So today what we're going to be doing is we are going to be essentially trying to diagram this type of process that can happen in our minds. Because the thing is, an addiction is really whenever we are trying to enact something that is going to cover up something. So the main thing we want to remember over here is the Garden of Eden. And in Eden is going to give us the archetypal understanding of what an addiction is. Because you see, at the end of what occurs in the garden, we have this essential problem that, God gives us the essentially clothing, or there is the type of thing that we make for ourselves, which are fig leaves. So the thing is to try to figure out what are we using here. The thing is, life is not something that we can go through without having a kind of way of dealing with our guilt, dealing with our shame, being loved. This has to happen. And this either happens through false ways, which are fig leaves and addictions, or things that are not addictive, that are like the clothing. That was, the animal was killed at the end of the Eden narrative, and clothing was given to Adam and Eve. So here is what has to happen here. Because obviously we want to be getting our love and affirmation from God and from other people, rather than just like through using stuff and status and all kinds of weird stuff to kind of make up for the fact that we're not feeling loved and valued. So essentially what we're looking at here is to try to figure out what to do, because the thing is, it's obviously that, let's just make a note here. So we're going to make this note that it's not necessarily that you're not called to be a monk or a nun or a priest if you have monk addiction. The thing that's certain is that your vocation needs to be purified if you find that you have this. Because the thing is, what's really going on here is, so purification, we'll say this. And the question is whether that purification is going to leave anything other, after we get rid of the fig leaves, is that going to leave any clothing? Does this mean that this is what God wants you to be wearing, essentially? Like, is this part of the love of God and something healthy, or is this just an addiction and then it's gotten rid of after the purification? So the essential thing that's going on here, is we want to understand vocation instead of vacation. So the thing that's really important about vocation and vacation is because, you see, this is mature and this is immature. This is regressive and this is progressive. So my handwriting is not very good, but basically what we want to understand here is that, we really want to understand this, because the thing really that goes on here is that when we want to go back to just kind of escaping things, you see, a lot of times life is very barren and not very interesting and very arduous. And so we want to essentially go back to, if we just say this in psychological terms, we want to go back to the womb, where things are essentially we want to go back to mama. So I'll put mama here. We want to go back to that. And that also means we want to go into ourself. Because the thing is, when we go into ourself, we can use different things. We can use drugs. We can use, we could even use just like silence and being alone. There's all different kinds of things that we could use to try to get back into ourselves, to get back to avoiding the responsibilities of life. And so essentially, this is this regressive thing. Now, of course, we don't want to go to the opposite, where instead of vacation, we just have a horrible, the other polarity would be just kind of an obligation, maybe, where it's just terrible, meaningless suffering. Meaningless daily suffering. We're not called to this. Nobody's called to that. Nobody's called to this. So we're not called to this, we're not called to this. We're called to something which enables us to, to have both comfort and the cross, and to blend those things together. And that's our vocation. So, for example, we see Christ, he at the foot of the cross, he's obeying the will of the Father, and his mother is standing by him. So we have the Father leads us to the cross, and his mother is with him. So we have this blend here where it's like this is healthy and holy and good. And so this is what we want. We want a vocation, not a vacation. And the thing is, the vocation has all these elements of both comfort and the cross in it. And the thing is, it's not the peace that the world gives, but it's also not the problems the world gives. Like it's this kind of thing of, this is what we're looking for, and we're not looking for a vacation or just an obligation. So this is what's going on here. So this is some background stuff. And this type of thing, obviously this type of the vocation goes with this. And the fig leaves can end up with, obviously the vacation is like a fig leaves because of compensation. But also the thing is, you can think about, this is the obligation is also messed up. So we don't want that. But the thing that we have to do is we have to ensure that we purify our desire for vocation of these things. We don't want to feel that we're obligated. Oh, you have to be a priest, or like be a priest. You don't want to be a husband. That's bad. So we want to be able to purify our sense of vocation, whatever that may be, of these other things. So the thing that I'm really going to be focusing on, because most people, I guess most people don't stay here. The thing is, I'm really going to be focusing on this and how we can sometimes use religious vocation in a way that's addictive. And so we're going to really say, let me just switch colors here and put this down a second so you'll probably still be able to hear me. Let's do this. So here's what we're going to do in the middle here. The main thing that we want to understand in this whole thing is the trap and the escape. This is the central dynamic that goes on here. And the thing is, pretty much all the stuff we're going to talk about is going to kind of really feed into the trap here. And it's going to make us realize that there's also going to be things that are going to pop out of this, because our brain does calculations. When we're in a situation where we're stuck, like so for example, if someone says, oh, life is a horrible obligation, all of a sudden, naturally, you want to have a vacation from it. The problem, this is what goes on in people's lives. They work hard and they play hard. They work really at these jobs, and then they go out and get drunk, have wild things. It's a terrible lifestyle. You don't want to be getting drunk and working hard. That doesn't make sense. They see this like in college students sometimes. I want to get ahead, and then I'm going to get drunk and get hammered. This is like, because you're forcing yourself to do this, you have to have this relief, rather than living a life that's a nice, healthy blend. So here, the thing is, we want to understand this dynamic, the trap, and the escape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give some examples of ways in which, and we could also call these things like, in suicide treatment, for example, they call these things the drivers, and then there's the impulse for suicide. Same type of thing. This is the same type of thing that'll happen in an addiction. Like, oh, the person has a stay over time at work. Oh, I'm going to go and get drunk after work. So the thing is, whenever we have this kind of sense of being trapped, our brain automatically makes an escape. And then these thoughts of escape become intrusive, or kind of suggestions that pop into our mind, and we don't know where they're coming from. Because, so for example, if I'm saying, just if we want to use an example that's very clear, let's say somebody says, oh, let's use the financial collapse in the Great Depression. The people jumped out of buildings, to kill themselves because they said, oh, there's no way for me to get ahead anymore. My life is over. Therefore, I must leap out the window. That's a very terrible analogy here, but this is something that does happen, in that type of suicidal behavior. So this is the same type of thing that happens in all kinds of behaviors, but it's a calculation that the mind does. It says, hey, it also happens when people have an affair. Okay, my wife doesn't like me. She'll never love me. My secretary is nice. It's like, so therefore escape. It's like, this is the same thing that can apply to hundreds of different behaviors, but often we don't think about this as applying to religious vocation. Because the thing is, a lot of times we always are thinking about inspirations, toward the religious state, or like, oh, I have this thought returning of being a priest, which could be an inspiration. But it also could be an intrusive thought. Because, so for example, this is also similar to how OCD works. So the thing is, if you have a sense of, okay, maybe I'm a terrible person, then you have thoughts of being a terrible person. Maybe I really am a priest because I failed at everything I've done in life. Maybe I'm really supposed to be a priest. This ends up being a thought that just kind of suggested as a part of the brain's logic of trying to escape from an intolerable reality, rather than an actual inspiration of God. And so the thing is, by understanding our psychology, we get to purify our spirituality. And so this is what we're about to dive into. And so what we're going to do is we're now going to go into some expressions of monk addiction so that we can really understand how these dynamics can play out. So I'm going to suggest some different scenarios to you and wonder if there's some ways that, I'm just going to make a bunch of suggestions and tell me, I mean, obviously you can't really reply to me, but to tell me if you notice any of these things in yourself. And this will help you understand if you really do have what I'm calling monk addiction, and if there has to be some purification of your vocation. So let's think back to your early life. And so in your early life, I want you to wonder if there was a desire to be alone. Maybe the thing is there's some type of way in which you wanted to get away from some family members who maybe had big personalities and you were a sensitive person, and you figured, hey, this is really bad. And maybe you tried at sometimes to directly assert yourself and tell them, hey, you guys are being mean, you guys are being loud. And no matter how hard you tried, nothing really changed. And so you ended up having to be alone. Maybe you lived out in nature somewhere, or you hid in your room, or you went into books, or you went to grandma's house, whatever it was. You couldn't get your needs directly met by asserting yourself and making any real requests of other people. So instead, you stayed alone. So that's something that I really want you to think about, and see if you recognize any way in which you left your family and you couldn't directly get your needs met from your family, and so instead you stayed alone. So that is something I want you to think about. So now the next thing I want you to think about is, maybe in your childhood, maybe you didn't let me write this. You didn't belong. So you didn't belong maybe in school. And so maybe you needed to then create like some type of a super identity for yourself. Like you had to be better than others. And so, okay, so I'm better than them. That's why I don't belong here. And so think about that, whether maybe in your childhood, maybe you were bullied, maybe you were excluded, maybe you were this little egghead child, or maybe you were this nice little girl, and you were kind of not in with the other people, but you ended up having this sense of superiority to these other people who were kind of mean and kind of not people you wanted to be around. So maybe you started out being alone, and you started out being superior. You had this super identity. And so I want you to think about that, and see whether there's something in your experience that resonates with this. And so let me do this. Hold on, I have to put you down a second here. All right, so now we have another marker. So maybe those are some things in your early childhood. And then I also want you to think about role models. And if you have monk addiction, I'm going to estimate that you really don't have role models in your family that you want to be like. And so maybe your mother, if you're a girl, or your father, if you're a boy, these are not people that you want to be like. Possibly not people you want to be like at all. And so you really want to understand that there may also be a family history of addiction or some type of family dysfunction. Maybe there's a lot of yelling, or there's a lot of conflict. Maybe there's some alcoholism. Maybe there is some drug use. Maybe it could be any number of things. I mean, even worse, maybe there's a divorce. There could be some things like that. But the thing is, essentially what happens is you don't want to be If you're a man, you don't want to be a man. And if you're a woman, you don't want to be a woman. And so I want you to think about this. If there's something in your life that makes you say, okay, I don't want to be like this. And then also, by extension, you realize I don't want to be a parent. And then maybe I really want you to think about this. Maybe there's a time in your life where you actually vow or make an agreement with yourself that I'll never have a family. So maybe, like you say, that there's this thing of this vow here. You say sometimes to yourself, like, I'm never going to do this. And you really want to be different because, you really don't want to be a woman like your mother or a man like your father, maybe. It's because maybe there's things that happen that you don't want to do this. And we're not judging people. We're not doing that. We're just saying this is the way it is. This is the way psychologically what's happening for you. And maybe you want to be a different kind of man or a different kind of woman. And then that leads you to start thinking about something like these spiritual things. And then the other thing to remember too is maybe there's no spirituality in your family. Meaning there's no religion. And then you see family life as a meaningless thing. So you see people, and you also see a lack of wisdom. And there's no answers to life coming from your family. So you say, okay, my families don't know what life is about. And so you start to just say, hey, I don't want to be part of a family because they don't have wisdom. They don't have meaning. They're not doing anything that's important. And so you start to realize these things, this is a bad and dangerous place. And this isn't going anywhere important. So I better get out. And what does this remind us of? This reminds us of the trap and the escape. Because if you see, okay, let's go through them here. So you say, okay, my family's loud and it's not a comfortable place to be. I can't get them to do what I want or treat me the way I want them to treat me. Not that they're necessarily doing anything that wrong. It's just saying, okay, I can't get my needs met. There's not any changes that I want to see. I'm trapped. How do I escape? I be alone. Then you go here, you go to school, you say, okay, everybody's mean. I don't belong here. So I have to be different. So you say trap. Okay, I'm trapped. I don't belong. Escape. I must be different. Let me invest in thinking about how special I am as I sit under the swing set and think about, I don't know, Picasso, whatever it is. So it's, this thing. All right, so being a man is bad. I'm not going to be a layman. Being a woman is bad. I'm not going to be a wife. Being a wife is not good. So it's like you kind of have this escape. And then you say, if there's a divorce, marriage is not good. I better not ever have a marriage. Being a parent that's really especially if you saw, this is they have no spirituality, there's no meaning, there's no wisdom, not going anywhere. I better get out of this. I better do something different. So, and of course, if you're having these escape thoughts, if these are going to create intrusive thoughts, and they're going to create you're thinking about getting away all the time, because naturally, if you're trapped in a situation, you'll be like, my brain's going to be thinking, how do I escape from this? So, these are going to be some different ways that you're going to be thinking about these things. Now, I'm going to include some things here that may be important. So here's the thing also. So the thing is to enhance these type of issues, it's very likely that you would also have things like some type of struggle or aversion to, or both, with human sexuality. So the thing is, I'm just going to put this here. So we're going to have some type of sexual issue. And usually this could be some type of issue with self-control of some kind. Like maybe you go through puberty, somebody maybe develops a pornography addiction or something like that. And then there's an attempt to restrain oneself that usually has some type of a horrible struggle around this, maybe a pornography type struggle, trying to get away from this vice. And so then eventually celibacy becomes kind of this way of being good. And so you end up with two identities. Then you end up with this kind of thing of like, you're good when you're celibate, and then bad when you act out. And this could be a very much more complicated subject, but essentially it ends up with these two identities, that you're good when you're restraining yourself and you're bad when you indulge yourself. And this is very similar to these two polarities here. You have this obligation, the pressure, and the vacation, this kind of indulging yourself. And so this can be a very problematic cycle, and there's too much to discuss here, but it's important to realize again that this fact that there is this sexual issue, and this, just like we have this being alone, being superior, not wanting to be a role model, this kind of idea of celibacy as being good contributes to why you would see the escape from all these problems as being religious life, and then leading that to have the intrusive thought, constantly thinking about becoming religious. So that would contribute to it. Other things, I'm sure you can think of things on your own, too, if you have some issues like this. But things you could, so for example, let's say, let's also liken this process. I know this may seem controversial, and I'm not saying something that's even very strange here. And obviously, I'm not making any medical recommendations here. I'm not stating that I understand these processes fully. I'm not saying that this is a psychological treatment for any of these things. I'm merely saying that we can see sometimes something very similar, I think. From what I understand, I think that the psychology of this is actually quite similar to what we might describe in transgenderism. Because, you see, the thing is that it's essentially like, I don't want to be the man or the woman here. I need to get out, so I'm going to be a different kind of a man, a different kind of a woman. It just doesn't go as far as saying I'm going to switch which type of person I am. Because we can see this type of trap and escape mentality. Because you see, like, so for example, if somebody says, okay, I don't want to be a layman because I will have to work horribly, my wife will divorce me, my children will scream and cry, and I want everything to be quiet, so I'm going to be a monk because I don't want any of this stuff to happen to me. I need to get out of the trap. Same thing, I don't want to have to be a performance-driven person. I don't want to have to be, I want to be valued for who I am, not what I do. So I'm not going to be a man, I'm going to be a woman, so people can think I'm beautiful and good and worthwhile without having to perform. It's the same type of escape maneuver. But it's even very interesting when we think about this as the pressure from the OCD, like scrupulosity. If someone is scrupulous about being Catholic, they may want to switch to being Protestant, because then they say, okay, rather than saying, okay, I'm just going to say that I'm righteous now. Like rather than saying, oh, I'm a man, that means there's pressure on me. I'm going to be a woman, that means I'll be approved of for my looks. They may say, okay, I don't want to have to work for my salvation. I will therefore believe it's salvation through faith alone. These are essentially just like we would say, okay, now I am no longer a man, I am a woman. I am no longer a sinner, I am just. These are the same kind of categorical solutions that we feel also that somehow becoming this other thing is the way to gain freedom from some type of horrible reality. When really, the habit does not, the habit helps in making the monk, but the habit does not cause us to escape from things. And you may even notice in yourself almost a desire for this, the habit and the desire for this thing, but in a way that seems to be like if something bad happens, you just imagine yourself wearing a cassock, or something bad happens, you imagine yourself wearing a veil, or something like that. You may realize that this is, again, this kind of switching of categories in order to escape pressures and threats. So, again, this is something that we want to understand as this is a thing that we want to understand as monk addiction, and so we want to understand this as the means of purifying these things. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not called to be a monk. It doesn't mean you're not necessarily called to be a nun, but it means there's a lot of doubt that you would be. I want to also remember that there's other things, like anything that requires these restraint things. I want to pause the video soon because I don't want it to go too long and then get cut off. But I also just want to say, think of all the type of things that can happen. So for example, being dumped by lots of people, having a long history of relationships that fail. So failed relationships, like broken heart, we'll make a little heart there. These type of things can also pull somebody toward this. Also, like maybe there could be things like you also might see restraint patterns like with the celibacy type thing with the sexual restraint. You might also see issues with food. You might see issues with self-harm that could possibly generalize into things like penances. You could see these things kind of becoming like a twisted version of these things. You could also see ways of thinking, okay, like somebody thinking that there's nobody for them. There's no way for them to have a relationship, whether it's because they just have had bad luck or because they think that they're disgusting or ugly. There also could be some type of, body dysmorphias, ways of dislike of one's physical form. There could be all kinds of just different things that could be seen as impediments or ways that you're not going to be able to get married. Or men might think, okay, because of failures. So, for example, a lot of failures to compensate for failures. That's also something. And the thing that's interesting is also you want to also see times we talked about this thing of obligation, maybe being extensively overworked as a child. So, like the thing of like having to live a life that you didn't plan to live. So, overwork and having to work for things that other people gave to you, and realizing, okay, like, well, these people, they gave me this life, but they made me work so hard for it, but I'm not working for anything that had any meaning, so I need to get off of the life that they've given me so I can get out of this trap that they've trapped me in, and I need to escape. And I think the thing to remember is if you have a sense that religious life is comfortable, if you have a sense that married life is horrible, these are things that are not normal. Most people don't have this type of trap escape mentality about these things. So if you think, okay, marriage is horrible, children are loud, this is terrible and horrible and arduous, and this is like, I'm going to fail at everything, we have to realize that this comes down to what St. Ignatius speaks about in discernment. That this comes down to the idea that desolation leads to low and earthly things. So we are being drawn to the natural aspects of the vocation to religious life, not the supernatural aspects. Like we're not looking for the cross and for the comfort. We're looking for the fact that it's not loud. We're looking for these other things. And so there's a lot of other things that we could say here about. We're not looking for joyful sorrow and glorious. We're trying to avoid. We're trying to have relief. We're trying to have. I actually made a little diagram of the mysteries of the Rosary and how there's other. I forgot what the actual things. It was something like we want joy, sorrow, and the glorious things of God, rather than just like the sadness. We want to get away from sadness. We want to have relief, and we want to do it in style. So it's like, we don't want to do that. We don't want to say, oh, I have a nice fancy outfit, rather than I killed myself. I don't want to say, oh, life is terrible and sad, I need to get relief from this. No, we want this kind of dynamic life that includes all of these things, which is the vocation, not the vacation or the obligation. We don't want, see, these things here, these the relief, the sadness, and the pressures, and the doing it in style, these things correspond to this very natural life, to this fig leaf life, not the life of being clothed with Christ and the comfort and the cross. This is not the right thing here. So I think the thing that we want to remember is there's a lot of reasons why we might do the right thing for the wrong reason. And so we want to purify these things and see if there's anything left over, so we know that we clothe ourselves with what God wants rather than put on the fig leaves that we want in our vocation. So we don't want to give in to monk addiction. We don't want to live in a trap and try to have an escape. And the thing to remember about this is very serious material here. We really need to look at this stuff because it's so sad to see all the lives that are impacted by this type of thing. This is a common problem that I see in a lot of people's lives. It leads to a lot of confusion and a lot of issues that can be avoided if we really understand the psychology behind these things. So I hope that this video is helpful in introducing the different ways that monk addiction can arise, and how ultimately we want to really understand that we don't want to live based on these lies. We don't want to live in the lie that, and this is the thing, is realizing that we've been given all these lies inside of our mind that say, oh, you're not worth it, you'll never succeed, you can't be a man, being a man is horrible, or being a woman is stupid, or, being a housewife, that's not significant. Like, all these things we need to really realize that we have that these things are lies, and if we realize that those things are lies, then that's the root of this trap that's here, and then we don't need to have the escape. And we have to understand that when we really understand the trap, the escape naturally takes care of itself. When we realize we're not in danger, we realize that these things aren't dangerous, that God can provide for us. This is the real way out of this, is realizing that God is a good father, that realizing that it's not just this terrible trap, that God's not going to provide for you. These are some elements. I'm not just very briefly saying it, but this is the thing that's helped me with this, is realizing the lie and realizing that I'm following desolation. I'm realizing that I'm in desolation. I'm realizing that I'm, like St. Ignatius to say, we don't want to make a choice out of desolation. And it's realizing that we are in this depressed place. And once we see the depression, and once we see that it's a lie, we then realize that these thoughts are intrusions and that are leading to escape, because we're not directly trying to meet our needs by having real intimate conversations with other people, by asserting our needs, by making ourselves vulnerable, like Christ on the cross. We're not doing that. So the thing is, we have to understand that the way forward is by directly meeting our needs and courageously standing up for what we need in life. And also realizing those lies that are creating that trap. And, the fact that we're not standing up for ourselves also is leading to that trap. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to listen to us, but it means that we have to have some more oomph, and try to communicate better and these type of things, so that we don't start needing to escape because we're not improving where we are. So there's a lot of parts to this, a lot of things that we could say about this type of thing, but it's really about that we don't feel that our needs can be met directly, so we're trapped, and so we have to indirectly meet them. So the thing is really maybe we're called to marriage, but we just don't feel that we can have a good marriage, so therefore we just try to do something else. So we want to make sure that we directly meet our needs. And the thing is, this is true even if we are called to be a priest or are called to be a monk or a nun or something like that. We aren't called to do this as an escape or to do this in an unhealthy way. We're called to have the emotional maturity of Christ. We're called to be human. Christ, called on his friends to be with him in the Garden of Gethsemane. He is a role model for us in vulnerability and needing other people and asserting his needs. And so I hope that this video is helpful, because, and I also just want to say some books that you can look at for further reference are the book Facing Love Addiction by Pia Mellody, and primarily people who would fall into the monk addiction category would be understood to be the love avoidant or avoidance addict that she describes, depending on the edition of the book. You also can look at books like No More Mr. Nice Guy or No More Christian Nice Girl. No More Christian Nice Guy is also another one. Not Nice by Dr. Aziz Gazipura. Some of these books there's a little bit of some crass elements or some improper elements in the dating and relationships and sexuality sections of some of these books, but they really do describe accurate psychology and the nice guy syndrome and these different types of things, because there's ways in which these ideas are very helpful. You also can look at How We Love by I think the last name is Yurkovich couple. That's a pretty decent book. So those are some different ideas. Those are some places you can look to in order to get some ideas further on monk addiction. And those are some places that have helped me get some perspective on these things. Now, the books aren't perfect; they're more secular, but this type of layout here is something that can get you started with understanding how monk addiction works and how to purify your vocation so you can do what God wants, rather than being driven by these unconscious motives that attach to what we do. So hopefully this is helpful. Hope you enjoyed the video, and hope you have a good night or day whenever you watch this.